the old Twitter. Feel free to give me a follow on the old TikTok as well. Same handle, pro2_ANT. The TikTok I use for some video breakdowns and clips and highlights and film footage, and also some, good old wholesome chicanery and tomfoolery and shenanigans and all that kind of stuff, as I do for the Twitter as well, and mixed in with the seriousness. In tonight's episode, as far as seriousness, what we're going to dive into are James Cook, Devin Singletary, Zack Moss, and the Bills running game as a whole. We are going to take a look at these three running backs and the Bills run game in terms of how it functions within this offense. I think we have gotten to a point, for some fans at least, where the running game is so much of an afterthought because of Josh Allen, because of the passing game. And we potentially have gotten to a point, again, for some fans where, and even for some analysts as well, where it's become, doesn't matter about the run, just pass it nonstop. Who cares about the run? And the running backs have become more of, a functional piece within the passing game, which is why so many people are excited for James Cook. But that running game is still important. And we're going to talk about why in relation to the Buffalo Bills and in relation to the entire NFL and football in general, given today's nature and landscape of modern day football, and especially in the NFL. And then we're going to dive deeply into Devin Singletary, James Cook, and Zack Moss, skill sets, roles, traits, ideal functionality from each of them to give the Buffalo Bills offense the most optimal performance in order to make this offense as complete as possible, as sustainable as possible, and as matchup proof as possible. That is the theme and the focus for tonight's episode. As always, if you're joining me here live on tonight's episode 1, thank you very much. 2, feel free, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, philosophies, ideologies, maxims, whatever you got, throw them up into the live chat. For those regular viewers, listeners, watchers, whatever have you of the show, you all know how much I appreciate the live engagement, both between each other in the chat, but also with myself. It's, I go back and forth on this show between being solo and having guests. And when I'm solo, you can get sad sometimes all alone here. So having people in the chat and saying things, it warms my heart and it makes me feel like I'm not alone. And that's fantastic. And as always, if you are kind enough and generous enough to donate and do a super chat, that gets immediate priority. 1, because I respect the donation. 2, because the color catches my eyes. It takes me away from my note sheet that I have typed up on the computer. I will bring your question, thought, comment, concern up to the forefront immediately. I want to go to we got some comments and things coming through already. Truth to Hearts, regular watcher of the show, appreciate you. Wow. Cook for 2,000 total yards, I'm guessing. There's no way it's going to be, just rushing, but 2,000 rushing, 2,000 total. I'm very interested. If you're still here, let me know. Spin comes through saying I can see Cook breaking 1,000 total yards, but I think around 1,000 will be his top end of production. I think a lot of it too is going to come down to the usage. That's the biggest thing. And we're going to talk about this later in the show. I think who gets used when and where, a lot of it is going to be matchup based on what Ken Dorsey has said about this offense and what he wants it to be, based on what Josh Allen has said. Some of those things we're going to talk about in this episode, based on the different pieces and skill sets that the Bills have on this offense. I think you're very much going to see a week to week varying kind of offense. Yes, there's going to be core foundations and principles and platforms from which the team operate from. But I think you could see a game where Devin Singletary has 20 snaps and Cook has 35. And then the next game, Cook has like 16 and Devin Singletary has 40. Like, I think you could see that type of fluctuation, not just from the running backs, but from the skill positions as a whole on offense, as Ken Dorsey attacks defenses based on whatever their weaknesses and or vulnerabilities are on a week-to-week basis. So that's my only hesitation with giving like yardage prediction, because I think a lot of it's going to be determined by matchup and what you're getting from your defenses, and we're not going to know what those defenses really look like until we get into the season. Some more comments. What's up, Steven? Steven in here with a let's go. That's fantastic. Spin says, to be fair, Bills' run production was, I believe, top 10 in the league last year, but that was including Josh Allen. Yes, Josh Allen was a heavy driver of the Bills' run game last year, and they finished 9th in DVOA for rushing offense. So by all means, a good rushing offense, but yes, a lot of it was done by, 1, Josh Allen designed runs to Josh Allen scrambles. That was the majority of the runs there for the Buffalo Bills in terms of success. And then if you break into any ball carrier with at least 100 carries last year, I think Josh Allen was highest in EPA per attempt. He was very effective on the ground with his legs. Question from Jim: which runner is best between the tackles? Devin Singletary. Lars comes in and says the regular season run game is maybe a bit less important because come playoffs, we can turn up the dial on design QB runs. Ooh, very interesting thought. I like that. What's up, Ron? Appreciate you for joining me. Awesome comment. You guys know how much the tree means to me. You guys know how this show is basically just an excuse and a medium and a vehicle for me to be able to broadcast the tree to the world. I love this comment here from Vito. Vito, thank you very much for joining me and for following me on Twitter and engaging with me on Twitter and DMing me. You're a good dude. Appreciate you. Vito says, did we talk about the tree yet? I need the deets on the green theme. Awesome question. Awesome comment. Appreciate you. What it is, so the tree by nature is silver. Even though it's not regular season football, we have to start a football tomorrow with the Jags and the Raiders in the Hall of Fame game. And then the Bills preseason, their first preseason game is 10 days away, 9 days away. So you got the green garland, football field green, to go with the silver nature of the tree to kind of mimic like the white lines of a football field. So I'm trying to create like a little football field atmosphere with the tree. That's what we're doing because football's kicking off. I don't care that it's the preseason. We have real football starting tomorrow. Jags, Raiders, I'm excited to see some of their players. I'm excited to have football back. Football is here. Therefore, in the spirit of that kickoff nature, got a little football field tree going on there, but I appreciate you. Oh, wow. This is a fantastic question from Jason. When Matt Hawk and Bobby Hart get cut, if they tag teamed in the WWE, what would they be called? I need prep for that. I don't know. Oh, man. That's a really great one. That's one of the best questions I've ever been asked. That's fantastic. Andrew coming in saying James Cook reminds him a lot of Alvin Kamara during his rookie year. Exciting potential. Oh, good question here from Jim. Can the backfield get 3,000 combined yards this season? That's a very interesting metric to look at holistically for this team. Baby Buster coming in and saying, I have one name to keep in mind on why the Bills' run game will be much more improved this year. Aaron Cromer. Very fair. Very fair. Koala Bear coming in and saying, I could see Cook breaking 1,100 in all-purpose yards. Oh, very. I'm liking the bars and the metrics that people are setting here. Jason's on the opposite end saying, I honestly don't see any of our backs getting 1,000 yards. I like the idea of Jim's comment here of can the backfield get 3,000 combined yards? I think that's very interesting because one of the things that, we're going to talk about when we dive into it of this Bills backfield is Singletary is probably the closest as of right now to being a complete running back. But if you took Singletary and Cook and Moss and morphed all of them, you have like an absolute complete running back. So that's why I think it's even more interesting with this whole matchup piece with this offense, because based on how you want to attack a defense week to week, you will use those different running backs in those different ways. And it's very interesting. That's why I think because when you combine all the running backs on the Bills offense, what they would be holistically, I think it's interesting to look at the, combined yards in the backfield from a combination perspective. Very interesting. Ooh, this is some truth from Jessica. She says, no running back is good between the tackles until we have a functioning O-line. Ooh, dropping some heat. Steven says, if Cook gets 1,000 total yards, that would be spectacular. Hi, Sophia. I appreciate you. Oh, Bills Mafia STF comes through and says Hart and Hawk would be called happy feet for Hart's inability to block and Hawk being a punter naturally. I think that's fair. Oh, Chevy coming through and saying 3,000 combined yards for the backfield is too high. Oh, he said that in the earlier comment. In this one, I bet my life savings they don't even come close to 3K. Oh, we got a little bit of fire, a little bit of spice here in the chat to start. Speaking of spice, there's some really good spices in One Pie Pizza. AKA the best pizza, hands down, in Buffalo, New York, AKA the sponsor of Disguise coverage. Go into the episode, show notes, the description, whether here on YouTube or any one of the podcasting apps and platforms, you will see the online menu for One Pie Pizza. Get yourself some One Pie Pizza. Treat your taste buds, treat yourself, treat the fam to some pizza. Every night, every day is a pizza night and a pizza day. And also, as I continue to mention and bang the drum for all the time, they're genuinely good people over there at One Pie Pizza. Tons of initiatives, whether it's partnering with Roswell to knock out cancer, whether it's partnering with the Alzheimer's Foundation or the SPCA or Toys for Tots. They do a lot of good for the community and a lot of good for this city. And on top of it, they make a tremendous product. Delicious sweet sauce pie, fantastic cheese to sauce ratio, cup and char pepperoni, homemade blue cheese. It's all chef's kiss. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza. You will not be disappointed. Also want to mention Underdog Fantasy, partner of Cover One, is a brand for the season, much like last year. Sign up for Underdog Fantasy or download the app. And when you sign up, use promo code Cover1. You see it right there on your screen. For those of you listening, it's Cover and the number one, capital C, number one after cover, all one word, capital COVER and the number one. Use that promo code and Underdog will match your first deposit up to $100. So you have the opportunity to get up to $100 free to play Underdog Fantasy using this promo code, or as much as you want, because they're going to match that first deposit up to $100. So you got the opportunity to get some free cash and some free deposit money to start off for that. I love Underdog for their best ball action. I've come around on best ball the last couple of years just because of you still get to play fantasy and have that draft experience, but then it's kind of like set it and forget it because you don't have to monkey with your lineup every single week come the regular season. So it's it's still fantasy, but it's a little more zen and a little more relaxing. I'm very excited to do my Best Ball Mania team that I'm going to be doing in a couple weeks. So Underdog is fantastic. We have a lot of leagues going on with the Cover One team. We tweet out different links to get in groups and leagues with one another and fans of the show and just people we interact with. So a lot of potential. Sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Use that Cover One promo code. Do yourself some good. Also, I want to mention here as we start to shift over and go full gear into this episode. If you're watching this episode right now here live, or if you're watching later, but you're still here in this moment, please drop a like on this video. I know it's corny. I hate shilling out for likes, but they go a tremendously long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. They genuinely help with the algorithm and push us up towards the front when it comes to traffic and activity. So please drop a like on this video. If you are listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms, please drop a rating, please drop a review. And whether you're on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms or here on YouTube, please subscribe to Disguise Coverage, please. And thank you. I appreciate your support in any way, shape, or form that it comes. Let's go now. Oh, interesting. A lot of the chat's blowing up with that 3,000. Kendall. What's up, Kendall? Kendall says, is it 3,000 yards combined and all purpose? If the Bills start to make defenses respect the running back position holistically, it can really unlock things in this offense. That's an excellent comment from Kendall. And that's going to lead me into my first point here on this show. I want to talk about the nature and role of the running game. I know We've talked a lot this offseason about the Bills running backs and how they function in the passing game, especially when it comes to James Cook. But we've talked about it a little bit with Devin Singletary. We've talked about it a little bit when it comes to Zack Moss. The Buffalo Bills need a good running game. Good is relatively defined. Same thing if you're saying successful or saying effective. Like that can be defined differently by different people. But I'm going to define what it means for this team and what it needs to mean. And also pump the brakes for a bit. I know, because I know when we talk run game and we talking about running the ball, a lot of people like to get into the mode, we don't need to run the ball. Why are we even talking about run the ball? Don't you see the metrics? Don't you see what the statistics indicate today that, it's a passing league and you need a quarterback and this and that? I'm not saying anything like that. I'm not even saying run the ball more, but the Bills need a successful running game. I don't care how good your passing attack is. You have to have some semblance of a running game, something to keep defenses honest. No one can be one-dimensional. Even if that one dimension that you have is awesome, odds are at some point, someone is going to match up well with that one dimension. And when that happens, what do you do? What's been the theme of this offseason for me on the show? Rock, paper, scissors. You need to be able to throw rock, paper, and scissors. Throwing only one of those or throwing only two of them limits your odds of consistent and sustainable success, especially come playoff time when your opponent has an entire season's worth of film on you that they can use to break down and identify your strengths, your weaknesses, your tendencies. You need to be able to match up no matter the opponent, no matter the situation. You need to have multiple options to victory. I don't care how good your one dimension is. If you're an awesome running team, fantastic. You need to have a passing game. If you're the Colts, good for you. Your running attack is beautiful. You better hope Matt Ryan can throw the ball and you guys can pass. And it's the same thing for the Bills, just like it's the same thing for the Chiefs. Your passing attack is fantastic. Cool. You need to be able to run the ball. Today's NFL defenses are mainly pass defending defenses. Nickel is base. We know this. They're the days of teams coming out and running the majority of their defensive sets and reps with 3 linebackers isn't how today's NFL is played. Nickel is base. Teams like to give light boxes. Your defensive tackles are more one gapping, pass rushing penetrators in the mold of Aaron Donald than they are 2 gapping run stuffers like Vita Vea. Although Vita Vea can rush the passer a little bit. He's a freak and he's fantastic. But the moral of the story is defenses are built to stop the pass because, again, that's what governs today's NFL. And in that vein, defenses are trending towards 2 high safety coverages post-snap and 2 high safety shells pre-snap as the new means of defending the pass. It's something we've talked about multiple times on this show. But the crux of it all is these defenses that modern NFL defenses are trending towards, they are designed to disguise coverages and limit explosives from the offense in the pass game. The idea is you are keeping everything in front of you. You are choking passing windows and throwing lanes. You are funneling ball carriers to the kill zone and rallying and tackling. You are trying to make the offense be patient and make them execute over and over to beat you rather than hit chunk plays. Okay, now how does this connect to the run game? Oh, that's a fantastic question. I'm glad you asked. Let's talk about it. As an offense, those 2 high defenses, right? And especially for the Bills, they're getting 2 high defenses post-snap, and they're also getting a lot of zone coverage defenses. Defenses are, unless you're the New England Patriots in Week 16 in New England, you are not really playing the Buffalo Bills in either single high or man coverage because the Bills feast on that. Stephon Diggs, Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie on those overs and those crossers, it's a problem. Dawson Knox is a matchup problem for second-level defenders in a variety of ways. Josh Allen, his ability to run and scramble. You don't want to get caught in man coverage with the Buffalo Bills because, again, this is basic. If you're man covering someone and your man goes downfield, you turn your back to the quarterback, you get away from the line of scrimmage. If Josh Allen breaks contain, he suddenly has all this green pasture to roam and run like he has for his first several seasons in the NFL. So when you've got these 2 high coverages and you've got zone coverage coupled with it, defenses are trying to keep everything in front of them. They're not trying to get beat over the top. They're trying to limit the explosives. They're trying to limit that vertical presence that an offense has. So as an offense, you can double down on that and you can beat those coverages by finding a way to get over the top of them. Think, as an example I continue to use for this because it's readily available for Bills fans. Think of Gabriel Davis in the divisional round against the Chiefs, that 75-yard touchdown. Chiefs are in a 2 high look. Juan Thornhill is one of those split safeties. He hesitates a little bit and comes up as Dawson Knox comes on a bender in the middle of the field. Gabriel Davis gets behind him, over the top, 75-yard touchdown, boom. So you can attack where defenses are now trying to protect. They're trying to limit those explosives. They're trying to limit that vertical game. Cool. Attack it harder. Double down. Just going to go harder. Like, basically think of it like Michael Scott when Pam tells him to stop dating her mom. And he says, you know what? I'm just going to date her harder. You double down. You date her mom even harder, right? Go for that vertical. Try and split those safeties. Try and get over the top. Or you can force those defenses out of those 2 high looks. One of those ways is by running them out of it. And when I say running them out of it, I literally mean running the football so that they have to bring a safety down into the box. And now you have a single high safety look, right? Which is also why 12 personnel is potentially exciting because if you have 2 tight ends, the defense increases the odds that the defense may have to walk a safety down to match up with that look. But I'll continue. When you get those single high looks, again, whether it's zone, whether it's man, the Bills feast on those looks, those overs, those route running, precision routes from Stephon Diggs, the speed, the acceleration of the Bills wide receiver grouping, and the ability of Josh Allen to hit those routes and feast on those routes. The Bills take apart single high coverage, right? And if you run the ball well, you increase the odds that the defenses can't use those split safety looks because they want to walk a man down around the line of scrimmage. You increase the odds that, we can't go with a light box because they can run the ball. You also put defenses in a bind because, again, So many teams use nickel defense as their base defense. Not a lot of teams have a nickel corner that can play the run like Taron Johnson or Gardner Johnson in New Orleans, or even Mike Hilton in Cincinnati. I would put Taron and Gardner Johnson ahead of Hilton in that regard. Not a lot of teams have a nickel who can play the run like a linebacker with that type of tenacity and ferociousness coming forward. So you also put them in a bind based on their personnel package and based on their personnel alignment on defense. There's a lot of positives that start to result. And that run game helps attack the way the defenses are trying to play offenses now. You can also, as another way, you can hit little check down passes underneath and take advantage of the vacated space from second level defenders in coverage. Again, much like the Bills did in week 16 in New England, Hightower and Bentley are just bailing to drop deep into coverage, and they're vacating that underneath, and Josh Allen hits the top of his drop and boop, just checks it right down to Devin Singletary. And again, open green grass for him just to attack in space. Either way, what you want to do is you need to be able to stretch defenses vertically by either pushing the top off or making the intermediate defenders having to come up. You want to create that separation and be able to attack and make the defenses account for as much as possible. So again, that's why that running game is partially important. Defenses now feel like they have not a cheat code, but a potential answer to the pass game. They feel that, and I'm not going to get into the fronts because I don't want to get too off topic here, but they feel like from a coverage perspective, it's go with two high shells pre-snap and either stay in those two high coverages post-snap or spin a safety down, disguise your coverage, and play games on the back end in order to limit those explosive plays, right? And it all stems from those two high looks. But if you're a good running team, if you can run the ball, you're either going to force them to walk a safety down or you're going to feast on light boxes and nickel personnel as you run the ball and get easy yards and chunk plays in the run game, which is a nice, easy thing. And here's a fun fact that I want to mention. So, I got to stop. I just came to the comments because I saw a ton coming up. Sophia, I appreciate you. Sophia, one, thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat donation. And also, she recognized my not Office Space, but just regular Office, but she said, funny Office reference. Smash the like. That's right. Smash the like. Smash the like. Oh, John. Appreciate you being here, John. John with an awesome stat here. The 1978 Patriots ran for an NFL record 3,165 yards in just 14 games. Wow. Nice stat poll. Nice stat poll. Seth says we don't have the personnel for 12 personnel. We do if O.J. Howard is a thing. That's why O.J. Howard was brought in. We'll see. Hold on, I got to take a timeout again. I see I'm getting lost in the comments. Taylor says no garland on the Sithmas tree. Nice reference from last week. No, it's green garland because the green with the silver tree makes it look like a football field. You missed it earlier, Taylor. Keep watching. When this episode is done, replay it from the beginning and you'll see the explanation of why the tree is what it is. Also, I know there's a ton of other comments. I try to make my way back through everything as best as possible. I'm going to keep going through this topic, but then I'll start to circle back and get to these comments as we go. So, again, we're sitting there and we're talking about the running game and how it functions in with the pass. There's no doubt that today's NFL is a passing league. In order to be a Super Bowl contender, realistically, you need a good quarterback. You need a top-tier quarterback, or at worst, in that second tier. Then you have the rules of today's NFL, where it's so heavily skewed towards favoring and giving an advantage to the offense. Then you have the athletes that are coming up, and the top athletes now seem to be wanting to play quarterback and wide receiver in these skill positions. So all these things that are happening from, throughout the ranks coming up to the NFL itself, it favors a passing league, it favors a passing attack. So it makes no sense that when you're looking at DVOA, which is something I very much subscribe to, and in case people don't know, I wanted to bring it up. DVOA basically, it's an efficiency metric. It measures a team's efficiency by comparing success on every single play to a league average based on situation and opponent. It's a method of evaluating teams, units, and players. And basically, this is directly from Football Outsiders, who came up with DVOA, and I love it. It takes every single play during the NFL season and compares each one to a league average baseline based on situation. So it's as close to being an equal metric for all because of what it takes into. It's holistic, it's fantastic, it's efficiency-based. I love it. When you're looking at DVOA, the 2021 top 10 DVOA offenses were all in the top 13 for passing DVOA, which makes sense, right? The best offenses usually have a good passing game in today's NFL. That makes sense. That tracks. But what's also interesting to note is of those top 10 DVOA offenses, 7 of them also had a top 10 rushing DVOA. And those that didn't have a top 10 rushing DVOA didn't have one lower than 14th. And furthermore, the top 14 DVOA offenses all had a top 16 rushing DVOA. So the best offenses that you think of, yes, they are governed by the pass. That is their MO. But they all have successful running games. And just to bring it up, I wanted to bring up the top 5 passing DVOA offenses, right? So we're looking at them. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, first in passing DVOA, 5th in rushing. The Green Bay Packers, 2nd in passing DVOA, 8th in rushing. The Kansas City Chiefs, 3rd in passing DVOA, 10th in rushing. The Los Angeles Chargers, 4th in passing DVOA, 14th in rushing. And the San Francisco 49ers, 5th in passing DVOA, 4th in rushing. 4 of the top 5 passing offenses for DVOA had top 10 rushing attacks as well. That goes to speak to the multiplicity, the versatility, as Kendall says. Be right there, Kendall. Kendall says it sounds like running the ball is still important. Kendall's smart. Kendall gets it. Running the ball is still important. It doesn't mean that, and I think this is where a lot of people get lost with it. That doesn't mean, well, you need a 50-50 split, or you need 60-40, or you need 70-30. There's no specific ratio, which we're going to get into in a minute. But running the ball is still very much important. The best offenses, yes, they are led by good passing games. But those teams with the best passing games also have good rushing attacks. And how do those two things go hand in hand? Well, let's take the 2021 Buffalo Bills into account, since this is a Buffalo Bills podcast that covers a lot of things that are also non-Bills related. Think about the first 10, 11, 12 weeks of the year for the Buffalo Bills. Think about the times when the Bills struggled the most. Think about the second half of the Pittsburgh Steelers game. Think about the atrocity that was the game in Jacksonville. Think about the times when things just looked hard for the Bills, like there was just a lack of rhythm, like they weren't clicking. Think about those times. And I would bet those times came when the Bills did not have a strong semblance of a running game. Now, think towards the back end of the year. Granted, opponent comes into play here, but think of the back end of the year. Think of the second half of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game and forward. What started happening that the Bills' offense started clicking and things became easier for Josh Allen in the passing attack? They had a gap scheme running game with Devin Singletary, and teams had to respect the run. The Bills run a lot of RPO, so all of a sudden you have that run action in the backfield. Now second-level defenders are creeping up a little bit. You're going play action, and yes, you don't need a good running game necessarily to have a good play action game, but having one helps. And all of a sudden in the back end of the year, the Bills are going play action, and linebackers and safeties are getting sucked up, and they're getting beat over the top. Teams are having a game plan potentially a little bit more to stop the running game. The Bills are getting some good looks against light boxes, and they're taking advantage of it. You don't need to be a run-first team in the NFL. And probably by all, accordances right now, you probably shouldn't be. You need a good running game. Do not get lost in the prolific nature of Josh Allen and the Bills' passing offense, and do not let it lead you down the path of you thinking the running game is not important. It very much so is. Again, just to drive that home, the top 5 passing offenses for DVOA, 4 of them all had a top 10 rushing attack. 3 of them were in the top 8. 2 of them were in the top 5. That's not a coincidence. That's regularity. Think of these top offenses, the best offenses that you think of. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have a good running game. Think about their Super Bowl run 2 years ago when playoff Lenny for Leonard Fournette was a thing because Leonard Fournette was running the ball down people's throats. Think about what the Green Bay Packers have, even with Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. You have Aaron Jones. You have A.J. Dillon. Think about those offenses. Think about what the Chiefs did last year where they revamped their entire offensive line with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith and had some more effectiveness with their running game to try and take the heat off Patrick Mahomes, because what the Chiefs and Bills are, It's very interesting how much of a parallel you can draw between the two in terms of their journey and trajectory as offenses, in terms of their success and the struggles and hurdles they faced and their potential ways to course correct for that. And then again, the San Francisco 49ers, who I think a lot of people would be surprised to see that they were fifth in passing DVOA, despite the fact that everybody loves to knock Jimmy G, but we know their rushing attack. They're potentially the most balanced offense, being fifth in passing DVOA and fourth in rushing DVOA. They're just a monster of multitude on offense. The running game is still important. Do not lose sight of that for anything. And the Bills, again, they don't need to be a run-first team. I'm not saying that. But they need to be effective enough in the running game to be multiple, to make defenses and second-level defenders have to honor the run action in an RPO, to make linebackers come up on play action. Yes, even though a good run game isn't necessary for an offense to run play action, but it most definitely helps. You need the run game to be effective enough to win on third and short when the defense knows there's a high probability of a run coming, or to be able to function in bad weather games that don't just happen in Buffalo, that happen in the playoffs. Look at the good teams in the AFC. If the Bills get the 1 seed, which is fantastic, everybody knows what the weather in Buffalo is. But look at the other good teams in the AFC. Cincinnati, similar weather to Buffalo. Kansas City, similar weather to Buffalo. Baltimore, not as similar, but could be not great on some days. The Chargers are the only one really like a good teams in the AFC where you don't have to worry about weather because 1, they're in California, 2, they're in a dome, so you don't have to worry about anything. You're going to need that. That's why the running game is part of playoff football and all that. But regardless of that, you need to be able to have that chess piece, that multiplicity in your back pocket. The Chiefs didn't go to it enough in the second half against Cincinnati in the AFC Championship. What happened? They lost. The Bengals just started dropping 8 and rushing 3, something that Eric Turner and I said the Bills should do when we broke down keys and tendencies leading up into that divisional round game against the Kansas City Chiefs, but that's spilled milk. No sense crying over that, although I still do cry because I'm still very upset. But nonetheless, you need that pivot, right? And also, I want to bring up something that Josh Allen said because I found it very relevant to this topic. When Josh Allen was asked what he wants the offensive scheme to look like under Ken Dorsey, Josh Allen said he wants the offense to be wide in scope. He said late in the fourth quarter, you got to be able to run the ball when they know you are running the ball. Timing and spacing and zone defense and guys that can win in man. And I think that's obviously very broad in terms of what it can look like. But you want to be multiple on offense when you're not sure if we're actually handing the ball off, or it could be a play action shot, or it could be a quarterback run. We want to be multiple so that the defense has to think about so many different things. And that comes with reps. It comes with execution and mentality in the run game and in the passing game. From the mouth of your savior and prophet, Josh Allen, for a lot of you who I think genuinely believe that about Josh Allen. That was from an article in The Ringer from Kevin Clark. Really good read. You should take a peek at it. Just dropped yesterday or the day before, I believe. Even Josh Allen recognizes it. You need to be multiple on offense. That doesn't mean run first. That doesn't mean a set defined ratio, but you need to have it in your back pocket. You need to be able to throw rock, paper, and scissors, because if you throw rock all the time, sooner or later, you're going to come up against someone who can throw paper. And when they throw paper, you need to be able to throw scissors. And if you're still just throwing rock, you're going to lose. Or if they're also throwing rock, you need to be able to throw paper. If not, then you hope your rock is stronger than theirs. But it'd be a lot easier if you could just throw paper. You need versatility. You need multiplicity. Also, larger scale picture. That isn't just necessarily about the Bills this year, but going forward, football is cyclical, which is why I mentioned some of the things at the beginning of this topic here about how modern NFL defenses are built. They are built to play the pass, whether in pass rush or pass coverage. And that ties into the cyclical nature of the NFL, because sooner or later, offenses are going to see how defenses are built, and they're going to start to do the opposite to attack those defenses, much like cover 3 was the big thing with the Legion of Boom in Seattle. So everybody said, you know what, let's all run cover 3. This is going to be fantastic and the most fun time ever. Didn't work like that for a lot of teams, but a lot of teams tried to employ those single high safety cover 3 looks. And what happened? Offenses started pairing a wide zone running attack with overs and crossers and play action and took advantage of that space in the intermediate behind the second level and in front of that single high post safety. And that's why defenses had to change to what they are now, because they were getting gouged left and right by zone offenses, particularly wide zone rushing attacks, paired with those deep overs and those crossers. So defenses changed, which means offenses are going to change in response to that defensive change. And something from Kyle Shanahan, 49ers coach, who I'm a big fan of, considering how much of the NFL operates off of his tree and his dad's tree, Mike Shanahan. But Kyle Shanahan said, there are always cycles. That's why, to me, there's no absolutes. That's why I use 21 personnel, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, probably more than anyone in the NFL. We have a fullback in there, not just because that's our offense. It's because I believe that's an advantage. People don't play base defense very much because the majority of the league doesn't have a fullback. And so you get people on the field they're not as used to practicing with. You know their menu's smaller, and it's, all right, I know I'm attacking these 5 things instead of these 25 things, and you can see it better as a play caller and as a quarterback. But also it can be an advantage for the defense. If there's only 2 receivers out there, that's a lot easier to defend than having to deal with a slot receiver. That's why it's important to me to have a fullback like Kyle Juszczyk, where you can do 2 back, but you can also be in 1 back and do 1 back type stuff. Very interesting from a coach who last year went to the NFC Championship, and if Jaquiski Tartt pulls down that interception, very much potentially probably goes to the Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of flack from people, and I don't really know why. He went to the Super Bowl. He went to the NFC Championship, and in the years he didn't, it was because the Niners were just hit with like a walking plague in terms of injuries, but that's a conversation for another time. But he talks right there. He has the benefit of having Kyle Juszczyk, somebody who the Buffalo Bills were in on in the Sean McDermott era, but Juszczyk was a free agent from Baltimore. He ended up signing with San Francisco, and the Bills ended up signing Pat DeMarco, but the Bills wanted Juszczyk. Juszczyk is a fantastic chess piece because, again, what Kyle Shanahan mentioned, he allows you so much multiplicity. He can block like a fullback. He can function in the pass game as an H-back. He can legitimately get downfield on wheel routes and rail routes in addition to working the underneath. He can pass protect. But again, it's all in that nature of being multiple, and it's from the mouth of someone who's one of the leading offensive minds in football, along with Sean McVay and both of their trees. And also from a guy who's the head coach of the team last year, like I mentioned, who had the 5th best passing DVOA and the 4th best rushing DVOA. And that's with a quarterback who a lot of people think is limited in Jimmy Garoppolo. You want that multiplicity. You want that variability. Yes, the 49ers take it and they turn that dial up and they do it to a different level with how they have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk and their multitude of weapons. They take versatility and multiplicity and they crank those dials up, and it's part of the reason why they're so hard to defend. But the Bills can take that. Actually, potentially, maybe you have someone of a versatility chess piece in the mold of a Kyle Juszczyk with a Reggie Gilliam. Potentially, maybe, hopefully, we'll see. Fingers crossed. But regardless, the point is, you need that multiplicity from a game plan perspective. And if you need it, just think back to this Bills season in 2021. Think when things were clicking and things were working really well versus when things were not. And when things were clicking, it was usually, ironically or coincidentally, potentially, in those games where the Bills had a run game. Pin and pulls, powers, counters, those gap scheme runs that the Bills were using down the stretch where they were effective against a variety of opponents. Granted, they weren't the best defenses, and granted, they weren't the best rushing defenses from a DVOA perspective and from a film perspective. But nonetheless, the Bills had a pivot in their offense. And that's what's so important. In a grand scheme, you want the pivot. You want to be able to play rock, paper, and scissors, and you want to be able to throw all 3. But just from a Bills perspective, just from a granular perspective, I've said it so many times on the show, but I'm going to say it again because it's the topic right now. Every single minute, second, hour, day, whatever have you, that is spent for opponents not game planning for Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Dawson Knox and Gabriel Davis and Isaiah McKenzie and Jamison Crowder and Khalil Shakir and that whole group, every ounce of time that is spent not game planning for them in some way is an advantage for the Bills. So if the Bills have to game plan, if a Bills opponent has to game plan even a couple extra hours for the Bills running game, That's advantage for the Bills because the Bills' passing attack is multiple and versatile on its own before you even get to a pivot in the run game and before you even get to another bullet in the holster, or bullet in the chamber and weapon in the holster. It's very, very, very important. So, I'm going to go back through comments. Seth saying this is good info, Ann. I would hope so. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let's go back to some comments. I know we got a lot of comments here. I'm going to pull some as we work through. Oh, good comment here from Jim. Jim saying screen passes anyone. Yes, screen passes would also help. They're an extension of the run game, as so many people like to say. And that's also an avenue that an offense can go down towards making teams have to creep forward and play that underneath to intermediate area. The Bills just haven't been a good screen team. And both as an offense and both within Josh Allen's game. Josh Allen isn't really a good screen quarterback. You have to have a certain rhythm and flow to it. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't click for him. But we'll see. Charles coming in and saying the Bills can run the ball. The problem is they rely too much on 17, and that's not sustainable long term. You need at least a threat of a run game. Yes, you need the threat of the running game that doesn't involve Josh Allen. I'm not saying don't run the ball with Josh Allen because I love the dual threat purpose. My favorite quarterback of all time is Steve Young. I love that dual threat piece in his game. Josh Allen's game is perfect for that, but in a perfect world, you don't have to run your QB at all. You can just protect him and let him sling it from the pocket. And when you run the ball, you run it with running backs. I want to keep him safe, keep him healthy. But I like his duality and I appreciate it. But yes, you need the threat of a running game from a non-Josh Allen perspective. Yes. Jason saying you need to do a better job running against those light boxes. Yes. Very true. Man, this 3,000 yards debate got intense. Oh, Vito coming through with a comment saying, I took a hiatus from Bills content for the offseason, but glad to be back and see Cover One stronger than ever. Appreciate the shout out for the brand. Yeah, we are stronger than ever, even though some people try to keep us down and make comments about us on a Sunday. But nonetheless, you do you. Good comment here from Kevin Cook saying running the ball is critical in areas like the red zone and late in the game and protecting leads. That's also another point we're going to talk about as we get to the Bills running backs in a minute here. You want to grind that clock out. You want that 4-minute offense where you can just snap it, run the ball, keep churning the clock, bleed the clock out, keep the opponent's defense on the field, prevent their offense from getting on the field. And again, you look at opponents, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Kansas City Chiefs, these teams that have potent offenses. It would be fantastic if you can have a ball control offense that is successful at moving the ball down the field. Now, that doesn't mean it just has to be running. You can complete a bunch of short passes and nickel and dime them and death by 1,000 cuts. But part of the reason why the Baltimore Ravens have given the Chiefs problems is, well, one, because their running attack is so unique and the Chiefs defense isn't built to stop it. But two, when the Ravens offense is cooking, the running game is cooking, which means they're gaining yards, moving the ball, getting first downs, and the clock is going continuously, which means you see less snaps for Patrick Mahomes and less opportunities for Patrick Mahomes to get on the field. Very nice piece. Kendall here with a stat saying the Bills had an average of 145.75 yards per game in wins, but only 116.414 yards per game in losses. I'm assuming that's run specific, and that would also make sense. Yes. Whoa, this is a really cool. John, you've had two amazing stats in this episode. This is a good one. John says, fun fact, no QB who ever led the NFL in passing yards has ever won the Super Bowl that season. 0-56 so far. Balance matters. Whoa, that's a really great stat, John. Well played. Yeah, and Kendall going through there and supporting John's comment. Oh, fantastic. Another comment here from John. I want to follow that up. John says, balance absolutely matters. And on 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 last season, Buffalo was Josh Allen dependent. He's great in short yardage, but too many hits on 17. Saffold will help in the run game. Brown as well, meaning Spencer Brown, if healthy. Very well said. Very well said. Very well said. Oh, and Vito comes through and says, yo, 2 different Vitos in the same chat. True Bills Mafia podcast. Well played. Yeah, there's 2 Vitos. You guys are going to have to fight or join forces and kind of do like a fusion, like Goku Vegeta thing. And that could be pretty awesome as well. But yes. Oh, awesome comment here from Douglas. I wanted to pull up. He says James Cook is going to be a problem for teams running those quick hitting arrow routes over the middle. Yes, a good old angle route or a Texas route or those option routes out of the backfield. Chef's kiss for this offense. It's a piece the Bills offense has not had, and that they clearly went for with some of their moves they made this offseason, which I'm going to talk about. I'm also going to take a drink. And also, I'm going to pull one more comment from John here. John, you're on fire tonight. John says, no one talks about the offensive line play when a team throws 40 times. It's way harder to pass block than run block. Imagine having to deal with TJ Watt on 40 rushes. I also wanted to bring up a cool point from Bills starting center Mitch Morse, who was in the Cover One film room with myself and Kendall Mursky and Eric Turner several weeks back. You should check out that episode, not right now, but after this episode of Disguised Coverage. And he said, I asked him because there's been all this talk this offseason about too high coverages and how teams are playing you on the back end. But did you notice anything up front schematically in 2021 that was different from 2020? And Mitch Morse came right out and said, teams gave us light boxes. They called our bluff with the running game. And basically, they didn't make them pay. That running game is important. Offensive linemen recognize it. The teams recognize it. And I loved, again, we're talking Bills specific here, but a lot of what I'm saying isn't just Bills specific, and it applies to the league and football as a whole, the nature of today's game, which I want to be a takeaway for a lot of people here. But if you want to boil it down and go granular to being Bills specific, yeah, Mitch Morse even recognized it. He said, teams called our bluff. They gave us light boxes. We didn't make them pay. And that showed up in some of those games when the Jags defensive line was teeing off against the Bills offensive line and Josh Allen, when TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and crew were teeing off against Josh Allen in that Pittsburgh game. And there's other examples as well, but very fair. Oh, comment here from Janine. Oh, hey, Janine. Janine follows me on Twitter. Janine's fantastic. What's a Texas route? Basically like an angle route out of the backfield. So imagine you're coming out of the backfield and kind of put it in perspective because I know you're watching. Imagine like you go this way around the tackle and then cut inside and go up John, Steven with a really good explanation. Basically, the running back sprints 45 degrees as if running an out and then cuts back in the middle, same 45-degree angle into the middle, sets up the back right for some yak. So, yeah, basically imagine you're lined up in the backfield next to Josh Allen. You take an angle as if you're running like on a diagonal towards the sideline. Say you're running to the right. So Spencer Brown side, you're running to that right. And right as you get to the outside hip or the outside foot of Spencer Brown, you plant your right foot and cut back inside diagonally towards the other sideline. And you have that passing window in the middle of the field. A really easy example. Think of if you're watching other teams, Alvin Kamara does it a ton for the New Orleans Saints coming out of the backfield there. So it's easy to kind of take a peek there and see it from another team's perspective, which granted there's, some similarities between Cook and Kamara from a stylistic perspective, not in terms of their overall skill sets. But I hope that explanation was sufficient. Again, you're running diagonal towards like that sideline, you plant, run diagonal towards the other sideline, going across the middle. And ideally you're getting the ball like 5 to 7 yards past the center, straight from the quarterback. You get that ball and you take it right upfield. Good question, Janine. Very good question. Very good question. Now, and also to Steven's point, yes, you have to have the right back to do it. Ideally, you have a passing threat, a la a James Cook. Now, we're going to switch the topic here. We're going to start breaking down. Welcome, Janine. I appreciate you. You always have really good questions, especially on Twitter as well. Appreciate you. We're going to switch topics now. I'm going to switch the banner, change the banner. We're going to talk about Devin Singletary as running back one, because I think he is running back one as of this point in time. Yikes. But something I want to talk about with Devin Singletary, and I don't want any of this to come as a knock to Devin Singletary because I like him. I liked him down the stretch last year. I loved it. As I mentioned earlier, I loved the pin and pulls and powers and counters and what the Bills were doing schematically with the running game. I like him. I like Devin Singletary. He is fine. But some advanced metrics. So from an individual perspective, I mentioned DVOA last year when it came, I mentioned DVOA earlier when it came to holistic offenses last year. You can also have DVOA from an individual perspective, right? So Amongst running backs with at least 100 carries in 2021, of which there were 50 total running backs, Devin Singletary was 20th in DVOA, 31st in terms of rushing, 20th in DVOA, 31st in success rate, 19th in effective yards, and 16th in defensive yards above replacement. Basically, defensive yards above replacement means a running back has more total value. Basically, it's gives the value of performance on plays where a running back caught or carried the ball compared to replacement level, again, adjusted for situation and opponent because of efficiency and equality, and then translated into yardage. So Devin Singletary, not bad. Top 20 for most of those metrics. Cool. From the receiving perspective, and this is where James Cook comes in, of running backs with at least 25 targets, of which there were 57. So 57 running backs in 2021 had at least 25 targets. He was 54th in DVOA, 54th in defensive yards above replacement, and 22nd in catch rate. So solid with 22nd, but not great with DVOA and DYAR. Devin Singletary is a good running back. I think he's somewhere in the 15. If I had to rank all the running backs in the NFL, I think he's somewhere in the 15 to 20 range. But I think he's closer to 20 than he is 15. But he's starting caliber. He's good. He's effective. He's reliable. We're going to talk about him a little more as we go through. But the first thing I wanted to hit with Devin Singletary is there's been a bit of a, I guess I'll say, narrative of Devin Singletary is better when he's the feature back. People point to how he performed down the stretch last year, and it was like, look how great he did when he was the RB1, when he was getting all this snap share and he was on the field a ton. Look how good he was. And that's true from a volume perspective. But not to diminish that, you should have better volume stats if you're getting the ball more. Yes, you should have more rushing yards if you're getting more carries. Like, not to knock anything in that regard or his performance at all, because he did good, and I'm going to continue to talk about the pros and the cons. But you need to look at it from a different lens, because I think a lot of people look at the volume stats and they see the more touchdowns and the more yards and are like, look how good he did when he's the feature guy. But when you're looking at volume stats go up if your snaps go up and your touches go up. So that's not necessarily there's not really a functional correlation there in terms of effectiveness or efficiency. That's why I wanted to bring up some of those efficiency metrics when it came to DVOA and DYAR, which again, I think he's somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, closer to 20, and he was 20th in DVOA, 31st in rushing success rate, 19th in effective yards, and 16th in DYAR. So again, not bad. But if you look at his snap rate, again, so I wanted to go into this narrative of he plays better when he's the feature back. Kind of, but not really. So if you look at his snap rate for the entire year, he finished at 59.9, so 60%. But weeks 1 through 13, it fluctuated. I'll run them down real quick, and this is from week 1 through week 13, obviously not including the bye. 75%, 66%, 43, 44, 26, 45, 34, 72, 38, 38, 68, 48. That's the first 13 games of the season for the Bills. So you can see how he started here and then up and then down. You see that inconsistency. From week 14 on, he was RB1. Week 14, 82% snap share. 15, 93%. 16, 68. 17, 80. Week 18, 76%. The wild card round, 86%. And the divisional round against Kansas City, 100%. So now, if we start to look at efficiency metrics within that, and I want to focus on 3 different sample sizes and 3 different sample groupings. So weeks 1 through 13 were when his snap share fluctuated. Weeks 3 through 8 were the stretch where he saw the least amount of snap share. Weeks 14 through the divisional round was when he saw the most, when he was the clear feature back, RB1 from a snap share perspective. Okay? Let's look at yards per attempt. Because again, I don't want to look at total yards. I want to look at yards per attempt, the efficiency piece. Weeks 1 through 13, 4.6 yards per attempt. Weeks 3 through 8, 4.3. Weeks 14 through the divisional round, 4.5. Very similar. All within 0.3 yards. Very close. So it's very similar. EPA per attempt, so expected points added per attempt. Weeks 1 through 13, he was 21st. Weeks 3 through 8, he was 19th. Same score each time at a negative 0.04. Weeks 14 through the divisional round, he was third in EPA for running backs at 0.06. Now, the big thing with that is expected points added. That's what EPA is. It can be a little skewed the more you score. Because again, it's a measuring stick of every single play basically and how much it moves you towards like a more. Oh, timeout. I got to stop because I saw a super chat. I'm so sorry, John, for delaying. I was in my notes, came back. Thank you so much for the super chat, John. And just for being here. You've been crushing it you're always fantastic, and I mean that genuinely, but your fun, the facts and the stats that you've been ripping off this episode, A1, top tier stuff. And I appreciate you being here in general. And then especially so much for the super chat. And John says, great show, Ant. You had me at DVOA. I am a former mathlete and I will own it. I appreciate you, John. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for the super chat. So the expected points added piece can be influenced by scoring. Literally, like if you're scoring a touchdown, you're literally adding points. And Devin Singletary crushed it down the stretch. Weeks 14 through the divisional round, 7 games, he had 8 rushing touchdowns, which led all running backs during this time frame. Also keep in mind the caliber of defenses that they were playing down the stretches from week 14 through the divisional round, just in terms of rushing DVOA from a defensive perspective. Tampa Bay was 12th, Carolina 15th, the Patriots 10th, Atlanta was 29th, the Jets were 26th, New England again was 10th, and Kansas City was 20th. So his EPA per attempt went up in weeks 14 through the divisional round, which is fair, maybe potentially a little skewed from the touchdowns. If you want to look at broken tackles plus missed tackles per attempt, weeks 1 through 13, 22.2%, which was second amongst running backs with at least 100 carries. Weeks 3 through 8, 20.9%, which was third amongst running backs with at least 40 carries. And weeks 14 through the divisional round, 18.9%, which was sixth. And his year-long broken tackles plus missed tackle percentage was 21.3, which was third. So I wanted to drive home with all of those numbers and all of those metrics. And I know, maybe I hope I didn't lose anyone in translation there because I know that's a lot of numbers. It was very stat heavy. But no matter how you slice it, almost no matter how you slice it, I don't want to speak in absolutes, much like Kyle Shanahan. Almost no matter how you slice it, whatever sample size, whatever frame you use for Devin Singletary, without trying to cherry pick and use confirmation bias, his efficiency metrics are almost the same no matter what. So when the Bills' offensive line was the bad offensive line in the beginning of the year, his numbers were almost the same efficiency-wise as they were when Ryan Bates was in there, and the Bills had their gap scheme, pin, pull, power counter identity towards the back end of the year. When he's getting, carries and it's kind of fluctuating and it's not consistent and his snap share isn't consistent, he has very, very, very similar efficiency numbers and metrics to when he's getting the lion's share and when he's the clear RB1 from a snap share perspective. And what I'm getting at with all of that is, because I don't want to knock him, for the entire year of the 50 running backs with at least 100 carries, Devin Singletary was 17th in expected points added per attempt, 14th in yards per attempt. And like I mentioned, this is the top one. He was third amongst all 50 running backs in broken tackle plus missed tackle per attempt, which is fantastic. We know what Devin Singletary is. This is the whole point, the crux of these stats and this evidence here. Devin Singletary is a fine running back. Again, if I ranked him, I'd rank him somewhere between 15 to 20, but closer to 20. He offers you a solid floor. His issue for me and for this offense, I think, is his ceiling. He doesn't necessarily, as a player, make the whole offense better. He doesn't make a bad offensive line look better than they are. He can function within a good offense, and he's a known quantity, which is a good thing. Devin Singletary is not the sexy running back, which, again, is fine. Having a guy at running back who gives you a known quantity, who gives you a high floor, who gives you stability, who gives you reliability, that is a good thing, especially on an offense that has several players in the high Bs and the high As. When you've got an offense that has Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, again, McKenzie and Crowder and Shakir and Mitch Morse and Deion Dawkins and guys with some high B or low A traits like Roger Saffold's run blocking, having those stability players mixed in with that, like a Devin Singletary, is a good thing. My thing with him is he doesn't offer you a plus matchup in any one particular area. He's not the fastest, not the most powerful. He doesn't have the best receiving ability. He's an all right pass blocker in pass protection, but he's not, I wouldn't say he's a plus matchup there. His best attribute is his agility and his missed tackle ability, his ability to force missed tackles, his ability to break tackles. He has that genuine quality of being able to make guys miss in a phone booth. I love that adage. That's the type of agility and quickness that he has, especially his lateral agility. Very good. And you see that in his broken tackle and missed tackle rate per attempt, which again, good efficiency metric. What the Bills need from Devin Singletary as RB1 is it's almost like an inverse relationship to James Cook. You need the stabilizing factor of Devin Singletary on first and second down. You need to be able to take advantage of light boxes. You need to be able to be effective in the run game and offer just enough as a receiving threat to keep defenses honest. That's it. Just enough so when Singletary's in the backfield, defenses, even just for a split second, have to think, well, it could be a pass. He might leak out. You just need enough. Don't be a liability in pass protection. Function just enough in Don't be a liability in pass protection. Function just enough in the receiving game, and then be effective running the football. Devin Singletary, as of right now, and I would imagine based on projection and what we saw last year, Devin Singletary will lead this team in carries. So he's got to be effective on first and second down. He's got to be effective in those areas when he's going to see those carries, but he has to be, so that's his primary motive and goal for me. But he's also got to be effective enough in those other areas so he's not a pure tendency giveaway. Appreciate the comment here saying you just nailed it. Singletary is Mr. Reliable. And again, I don't mean for it to sound like a backhanded compliment, and I don't mean it as that. I feel like some people might take it as that, especially people who really love Devin Singletary. He's reliable. I don't think he's a plus matchup. I can name several running backs I would rather have for a variety of reasons, but on this team, given the makeup on this roster, that's also the thing you got to look at too, right? Like every team, nobody has studs and stars at every single position. If Devin Singletary is your running back, I'm very okay with that. He's reliable. You know what you're going to get. He's not necessarily going to make you better, but he's not going to make you worse. And that's fine. He's steady. He's solid. He's reliable. And having a known quantity is a very good thing. And what they need from him, he's got to be effective on first and second down. He's got to be effective as that primary ball carrier for this offense. Because when you pair him potentially with another running back, as we flip the script here and talk about James Cook as a chess piece, that's what the Bills need from James Cook. They need him to be a chess piece, but we're going to talk about it in a couple of ways. So James Cook, on the other hand, when you juxtapose him with Devin Singletary, maybe his, especially if you're looking at the efficiency metrics with broken tackle plus missed tackles per attempt, you could say that his agility or ability to break tackles or make people miss, you could say that's a plus matchup. The numbers back it up. And so, honestly, so does the film. So if you want to say that's a plus matchup, that's fine. But that's his closest one to being a plus matchup. And if that is his plus matchup, that's his only one. James Cook, on the other hand, has multiple. You've got that speed from James Cook. In particular, you've got that burst from James Cook. I think James Cook is more bursty than he is long speed, even though that he runs that 4.42. But James Cook offers you that burst. That's legitimate. His burst is plus matchup burst. He's got that in spades. And then we know his receiving ability, right? His receiving ability, as I've said multiple times on the show, but I'm going to say it again now because we're talking about James Cook and he's on the graphic for this episode. He runs wide receiver quality routes. He understands coverages. He understands how to leverage defenders and leverage space. He has good hands. He can run a variety of routes, and he's smooth at the catch point. That's good for any running back, let alone a rookie running back. And that is also tremendously valuable to a pass-first offense like the Buffalo Bills are in today's NFL. Some raw numbers and some numbers from his college career at Georgia: 718 receiving yards in college, 274 last year, and 4 touchdowns. His career yards after catch per reception is 10.5, which is pretty good compared to what the Bills have done. Granted, a lot of that is scheme-based for the Bills, which is a conversation for another time. 19.5 percent career slot snaps, 6.7% out wide, all very valuable in this offense. You can have him run routes out of the backfield. You can motion him into the slot. You can motion him out wide, which is also something we've seen in training camp to this point. Right off the bat, we've seen James Cook used in a variety of ways as that chess piece, right? Which we're going to continue to dive into here. So that first ability, that first plus matchup is the receiving ability. The second, again, is his speed. And I think that factors into this Bills offense because this Bills offense holistically, I think it's quicker than it is fast. Stephon Diggs runs a 4.46. He's fast, he's quick, but I wouldn't classify him as a burner. Gabriel Davis can get vertical. He's faster than he gets credit for, but he's not an outright flyer. Isaiah McKenzie runs a 4.42. He's got some more long speed, but I think he's another one who's more quick than he is fast. James Cook gives you real speed, but more importantly, like I mentioned, he gives you that burst, which helps in the pass game, helps you create explosives underneath. What did we talk about earlier with what defenses are trying to do to the Bills? They're trying to keep everything in front of them, right? You're trying not to get beat deep. You're trying to limit explosives. And a lot of that is limiting those explosives from a down the field vertical perspective, right? So if you can create explosives underneath and in the short passing game, a la what the San Francisco 49ers do with their screen game, where they can create explosives just by running a quick little smoke or a bubble screen to Ayuk or Deebo Samuel, right? That's a game-changing piece. James Cook offers you that. He's got that burst to take advantage of that space underneath in the passing game because of his burst and because of his speed. And also that burst and that speed will help in the run game versus light boxes and versus those too high coverages that the Bills will see. It is very nice to have a defense give you a light box and you hand it off to your fast, bursty running back, and before you even know it, he's already 3 yards past the line of scrimmage. It increases your odds of consistently getting positive yardage, consistently keeping you ahead of the chains and ahead of the sticks. That's a huge thing for James Cook. The Bills need James Cook to take advantage of light boxes with his burst and with his speed. As successful as Devin Singletary was last year in several areas, and even when this offensive line was clicking, holistically, the Bills, it doesn't necessarily show up from a metric perspective, but when you grind the tape and you grind the film, like I do, you see that the Bills weren't as good against light boxes as they should have been. And again, that matches with what Mitch Morse told us in the Cover One film room when he said, teams called our bluff. They gave us light boxes, and we didn't do what we should have done. The Bills need to be better against light boxes. One of those ways is, if you don't block it up, great up front, which is going to happen. Nobody executes 100% of the time. It's nice to have a back in the backfield who has the speed and the burst to make you right even when you're wrong. So if you miss a block, James Cook can still make a play and get upfield quicker. Not that Singletary can't, but he doesn't have that burst like James Cook does. He doesn't have that speed like James Cook does to make you right even when you're wrong. That's a big thing in this offense. His ability, pardon me for the audio listeners there, I had to take a drink there. James Cook's ability to burst and use quick, one-cut, decisive runs can allow the Bills to fall into easy yards in the run game versus light boxes. And also, it'll force defenses to have to account for him and potentially game plan for him. No disrespect, right now, I don't think defenses are game planning for Devin Singletary. I think they're very okay. Granted, almost no matter who's in the backfield for the Bills, defenses are going to take their chances with whoever that is versus taking their chances with Josh Allen. They're going to continue to play pass first, which is why you need your running attack to make them pay as much as physically and humanly possible. And I don't think defenses are game planning right now for Devin Singletary. And like I mentioned before, anytime a defense has to spend game planning for someone other than Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs and that whole crew on the periphery in the passing game, that's a plus for the Bills. James Cook gives you a chess piece on offense and a chess piece that fits a role the Bills didn't have and a role that they clearly valued. The Bills went after J.D. McKissic this offseason, a receiving style running back. They also went after Chase Edmonds, again, another receiving style, pass catching, bursty chess piece of a running back. That was clearly something they identified after the season in their 2021 evaluation. They identified, okay, we need this type of skill set. We need this type of role on this offense. James Cook is that role, and he is that piece. And what the Bills need from him is to be that chess piece and be functional and effective in the pass game, in the slot, out wide, running a variety of routes, attacking and making defenses pay underneath with his burst and creating explosives in the short and underneath and potentially intermediate area of the defense in the pass. But they also need him to be effective in the run game and effective in pass protection. This is why I mentioned earlier where him and Singletary are kind of like the inverse of one another. You need Singletary to be effective as that predominantly, running part of the running back piece. You need him to be effective on first and second down and just functional enough in pass protection and in the receiving area. James Cook is the opposite. You need him to be just effective enough as a runner to keep defenses honest when he lines up on the field in potential passing situations. He has to be effective enough as a pass protector and as a runner to not allow defenses to solely clue in on him as a tendency giveaway and be like, Cook's on the field, they're running it. Especially because if the Bills want to use him on third down, and even if it's not third down, what defenses do when they game plan, they break everything down situationally. We'll take third down as an example. Defensive play callers have a script for, okay, if it's third and short, 3rd and 3 or less, here's what we want to go to. If it's 3rd and 4 to 8, here's what we want to go to. If it's 3rd and 8 plus, here's what we want to go to. Here's our pressure packages. Here's our coverage sets. Here's what we're looking for from the offense, right? And then how we play chess against that. Add into the fact, as you get later in the year, as I said earlier, you have so much tape available, and teams are able to just go through and dissect your entire catalog. By the time you get to the playoffs, teams have an entire book on who you are. Okay, when it's 3rd and 7 and the score is this, they like to do this. When it's 3rd and 7 and the score is that, they like to do this. Teams will break you down to within a molecule of who you are, which is, again, part of the reason why you have to stay multiple. You have to stay versatile so you can get to many things and keep defenses off balance and not allow them to clue in on any one particular thing. If James Cook is just a receiving piece, that's still helpful. That I don't want to make it seem like that's not a good thing, but it creates a potential tendency giveaway for the Bills offense, which we've talked about multiple times on the show. We've talked about it on the Cover One Film Room. I've said it. Kendall has said it. Eric has said it, I believe, as well. You need James Cook to be just functional enough in the run game and in the pass protecting area to really fully take advantage of his receiving skill set. That's what the Bills need from Mr. James Cook. Now, I want to go to some of the questions here as we go. Ooh, good question here from Pat. Pat says, what do you think about a two-back backfield, like a pony formation? Nice. Way to reference the SMU pony formation. I like that. The Bills have done a little bit of it in camp so far. I'd be okay with it. Again, it depends on what they're trying to get to out of it. What we've seen so far is two backs lined up in the backfield. So you've got Josh Allen and then you've got Singletary and Cook, bookending him in the backfield. And then a lot of times you're seeing Cook motion out of that into a slot spot or to a wide spot, which I also like because it helps potentially ID the coverage and potentially create mismatches. So I'm okay with the two-back backfield. I want the Bills to be as proficient in as many formations as possible. 10, 11, 12, 13, 21, 22. I don't care. I want the Bills to be as multiple and as versatile as possible. I like the idea of a two-back backfield. I think Singletary and Cook can be an interesting complement to one another. Even Cook and Moss. I think Moss and Singletary could work a little bit based on some things Moss can do, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But I like the idea of a two-back backfield. Oh, appreciate the compliment here saying that I break down info well. Very much appreciate that. Comment here from Les Brown. So he says, I like Motor, but this is likely his last year. I can't see Bean resigning him with the other players we got to sign. With that, I'm hoping Cook is starter by midseason. I think that's fair. I also think the longer Zach Moss stays on this team, I don't think this is revelatory or anything, but I think the longer Zach Moss stays on this team, the higher the odds increase of Devin Singletary not coming back, just based on how the Bills value the position and the contract structure and term and affordability that they do have. In a perfect world, again, I really like Devin Singletary. In a perfect world, yes, James Cook is the starter by mid-year towards end of year because he has the highest upside for the position. If he functions as a runner and in pass protection, he's close to being a complete back because of what he offers in the pass game. He becomes a true chess piece. He becomes a true weapon out of the backfield if he's a complete running back. So yes, I am hoping for that a little as well. What other comment from Jeff? What does the defense do on second down when you got Cook and Singletary, Howard and Knox? The E and the D and Diggs split out. Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing with that is that multiplicity piece. Again, defenses would have to account for so much. If you've got, 22 personnel or 2 running backs or 2 tight ends or whatever you have, you can get to so many more things in those personnel groupings. But you can get to so many more things in the run game because of the run blocking schemes you can create, and also you can get to more in the pass protection game and pass protection schemes. So I think that would be pretty fun. Ooh, Seth is here for Cook being the offensive rookie of the year. I like this. James Cook is the knight on the chessboard, and Devin Singletary is the king. He can move in any direction, but only one space. That's funny. That's funny. Ooh, and good one here from Spin. Singletary is the knight. He can dodge a defender, but he doesn't have the speed to beat anyone in a straight line, so he has to zigzag to get downfield. Ooh, very good. Kevin Cook, do the Bills use a different running style with James Cook, and does Zack Moss benefit from that? I'll start with Moss first. I'll go from the end to the beginning here. Moss was prolific at Utah in a zone running scheme. If the Bills incorporate more of that under Aaron Kromer, I think that is beneficial and helpful to Moss. I think he's built more for his zone scheme with his vision and how he likes to run the ball. With Cook, he can do both. I think he can function in zone because he has the ability to press the line horizontally and then get vertical, much like his brother Dalvin does. But I also think Cook can function in gap. I think he's more what we've seen from the running backs. Singletary has functioned better in gap than he has zone. I think Moss is a better zone runner than gap runner. Cook, I think, is in the middle. I think he can function in gap because he has that quick hitting ability and burst, although he does need to work on his patience a little bit in gap and setting up his blocks and leveraging the way he leverages space in his receiving game. He needs to do that same thing when running the ball and setting up his blocks a little bit better. But I think that comes with coaching. But he also can function in zone because he's good at pressing the line of scrimmage, getting that one cut, getting upfield, and getting through the hole again like his brother. So I think Cook as a runner allows the Bills to be a little more versatile and multiple in their running attack. But if they incorporate more zone this year, Moss does benefit. Very good question. Carl's all aboard this. He says, yes, the running game will open up the passing game. If James Cook makes the safeties cheat up to stop him, then it opens up the deep passing game. Then you'll see Josh Allen throwing bombs. Very well could. This is an analogy I use all the time. Another comment here from Carl. Pitcher in baseball wants to keep the batter guessing. If he knows what is coming, then it is a bad day for you. In the NFL, it's the same for play calling. Don't be predictable. Keep them guessing. It's one of my favorite analogies. It's up there with the rock, paper, scissors. You need a primary pitch. You need a secondary pitch. Oh, cool. You got a great fastball. That's fantastic. What's your secondary pitch? You got something off speed? You got a breaking pitch? You got a slider? You got a curve? Like, you got a change up? Is it a circle change? Like, what are you throwing? What is your secondary pitch to keep hitters off balance? Fantastic. Oh, wow. Everybody's coming with great metaphors and analogies. John says Cook is a scalpel. Moss is a hammer, and he will be much better this season. 18 months removed from his injury. Ronald just joined. What's up, Ronald? And John says it right there. The OG, Ronald Ringler, has entered the chat. Appreciate you for joining. Ron says the old man just got up from a nap. I appreciate you. All right. So I wanted to use John's comment there about Moss being in a hammer as a nice little segue here to Zack Moss. Zack Moss is the wild card for this position grouping. And I'm going to start it out with something. I've said it on multiple shows. I think people are writing Zack Moss off. There's a reason why in this show I started with Devin Singletary and then James Cook, right? I'm not writing Zach Moss off, but I think a lot of people are. I think he's the forgotten man. I think the common thought is he either gets cut or he gets traded for Bills fans. I think the odds of him getting traded could potentially happen, but do not write Zach Moss off. I've said it a couple times in other shows, but really going down the rabbit hole, I was watching for other things when, again, I've spent so much time watching the 2021 Bills all 22 and game tape and footage and really breaking down anything and everything that I can. And I was watching for other things and I kept noticing that Zach Moss would flash and Zach Moss would flash. And I kept noticing that. So I made notes of it. And then eventually I went back and spent just a day watching Zach Moss and a little more than a day as well. He was a lot better than I thought. I think like a lot of people, I had recency bias with how the 2021 season ended. And great comment here from John. John saying Moss is by far the best pass blocking running back on the roster. And job number one is to keep 17 upright. He is the best pass protecting running back on the roster. Very well said, John. I came away more impressed with Zach Moss than I thought I was going to be. Not saying he had a great 2021, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but I think a lot of recency bias, again, crept in for a lot of people. Devin Singletary was RB1 down the stretch. He performed well. We see the Bills try and sign J.D. McKissick. We see the Bills draft James Cook. And I think the common thought for a lot of people is like, all right, cool, Moss is done. He had a bad year. Devin Singletary looks sweet. They got James Cook. Moss is done. And going back and watching the film, Zach Moss, especially in the beginning of the year, was an effective running back, both as a runner and something that doesn't get talked about enough, his receiving ability. Zach Moss has a very good, legitimately very good ability to find space in defenses and make himself available to the quarterback. We have seen Zach Moss time and time again leak out of the backfield and find an opening in the flats or right, maybe 3 to 5 yards in front of the line of scrimmage downfield to make himself open for Josh Allen to get the ball and then do some damage after he's caught several receiving touchdowns because of that piece. He's a better receiver than given credit for in a variety of ways. That's point one. Point two, he was better runner than I thought he was, especially when you add in the piece, as John said it, where I'm going to go back to that chat. Where is it, John? Where is it, John? Bang. John said it. 18 months removed from his ankle injury, Moss hurts his ankle. Moss hurts his ankle in that wildcard game against the Colts. Comes into last season after having surgery and rehabbing. And Brandon Beane said it this offseason when talking about last year that ankle injury and that recovery hindered what he was. He was basically playing on one ankle. I keep saying angle. Gah. He was basically playing on one ankle. He couldn't cut off that one side. It affected his effectiveness, limited what he was able to do when the ball got in his hands, both as a receiver and as a runner, however you want to look at it. It affected his game. Brandon Beane came out and said that, I believe in March or April. And it makes sense when you watch the tape. He did not look like the impactful runner, the force that he was as a rookie. And it also makes sense with why you saw the lowering in trajectory of his play the further the season went along. The first 6 games, Zach Moss was effective in a variety of ways. I think his ankle hit a wall, metaphorically, and you saw his play deteriorate because his physical health started to deteriorate. And like John says here with this comment, he's now 18 months from that injury. I think he's healthier than he's been. And a healthy Zach Moss in 2020 as a rookie gave the kind of performance that at this time last year, people were saying that he was going to be RB1. You had a healthy contingent of people that wanted Devin Singletary to be the 2 and come off the bench and wanted Zach Moss to be the feature back. And the Bills felt similarly to a degree. Zach Moss got the ball in a lot of high leverage situations to start the year last year, whether it was red zone snaps and carries, whether it was red zone snaps and receptions, whether it was pass protection snaps, whether it was the guy to run the clock out in 4-minute offense and bleed the clock. The Bills used him. Sean McDermott likes him. Brandon Beane likes him. I think the comment from Beane about Moss's ankle is very, very interesting because he didn't look right all year. When you go back and watch the tape, you can see it and it makes sense. And it's interesting because if 2022 Zach Moss is healthy and similar to what he was in 2020, This is why I say he's the wild card, because he has a skill set that is unique to the Bills running back group. It's unique to the Bills backfield. Like John mentioned earlier, and like I co-sign, he's the best pass protector in terms of blitz pickup and knowing where to go, and then also execution combined with the physicality. His power skill set is unique to him. Like John said again, John's been crushing it this episode. Zach Moss is the hammer. He's got that 4-minute offense quality. He can grind the clock out like he did in 2020 against Pittsburgh. He can bleed you as a defense when you're tired in the third and fourth quarter from running around all day trying to cover the Bills' weapons and trying to chase after Josh Allen. He's that hammer. He's that guy who leans on you and just milks everything and wipes you off the field. That's what Zach Moss has the potential to be. And again, like I mentioned, he's better. He's a better receiver than given credit for, and he's good at finding the soft spots on defense and making himself available to the quarterback. Something he's done consistently in the NFL. That ankle injury is key. My thing for Zach Moss, I think and I don't think this is crazy, if he stays on the team, I think that's almost a guarantee that Devin Singletary doesn't come back. I also think there's a chance that Zach Moss potentially gets traded for like a 5th or a 6th round draft pick because he can be effective. And maybe that's potentially, his avenue for his career. Because what's also going to hinder him, what's also with that wild card piece, is we know what the Bills have done traditionally under Sean McDermott, which is they don't really dress that third running back. We didn't see a lot of games where it was Singletary and Moss and Breida, or Singletary, Moss, TJ Yeldon. We know that it's usually 2 running backs, and the third running back is Tywan Jones. So I think the odds of the Bills coming into regular season games consistently rolling Devin Singletary, James Cook, and Zach Moss, I don't think the odds of that are high, which is also interesting if they do, because like I mentioned earlier, like all 3 of them individually have their skill sets, but if you combine them all into one back, they're really a complete running back. You have a lot of chess matching potential, but you also have some potential tendency giveaway. Given what Ken Dorsey potentially wants to do with this offense, and like I mentioned earlier, I think you're going to see an offense that is driven by matchup, driven by a different attack week to week. So who gets, who gets the most carries, who gets the most snaps, who's the focal point from a receiving perspective, personnel packages, everything, play calling in terms of going vertical, going intermediate, going short, going quick game, going hurry up, anything. I think a lot of that is going to be dictated by the team the Bills are playing. Because of that, I think you have a decent chance that Zach Moss makes this team and gets used in the regular season, because there's going to be matchups where his skill set is the skill set of choice for Ken Dorsey. That's why he's the wild card for everything, because he could be running back 3. He could be running back 2. He could be RB1 still. If you're looking at training camp so far, Zach Moss started out on day 1 running with the 2s. Singletary was with the 1s. Moss was with the 2s. Cook was with the 3s. And then Cook got some work with the 2s and the 1s. As training camp has progressed, Zach Moss has started to see more reps with the 1s. Now, I know some people will be like, well, it's because they're just showcasing him because they want to potentially trade him. Maybe, but the odds of that happening in practice aren't high. We'll see what the preseason brings. I think because, again, when you look at the tape, Moss was better last year than people give him credit for, although the metrics do not speak to that. But again, that's why you look at the advanced metrics and you look at the tape, so that way you could put together a holistic picture and not get caught, in one silo or limiting your sample size and limiting your opportunity. The film speaks to him being better than I think a lot of people thought he was last year. He's healthy this year, definitely healthier, but just general healthy, he probably is this year. And then you combine that with his skill set and it being unique to him. Cook doesn't really do and can't do what Zach Moss does. Singletary, closer, but not so much. Moss gives them another option, another chess piece, whatever we want to decide Zach Moss is. Whatever other piece. I know we've talked about knights and kings, so whatever Zach Moss wants to be for everybody in the chat, figure it out, talk amongst yourselves, bring it to the chat. Let's do that. Zach Moss gives you another chess piece. He's another weapon in the holster. He's a different kind of weapon. It's that hammer. Cook is the scalpel. Moss is the hammer. I don't know what Singletary is, but they're all weapons of some kind. And with Ken Dorsey trying to keep this versatile multiple bag, he's that wild card piece in terms of what he's going to be. Comment here from Walter. Walter saying, not enough is said about how little time Moss has had to run behind a consistent offensive line group. Couple that with how little he sees the field, and it's easy to understand his struggles. What's also interesting, again, as I mentioned, he's good in zone, and if Aaron Kromer brings some zone scheme to this team, it potentially favors him a little bit. Oh, good question from Carl. If Saffold's ribs and Brown's back keep them off the field, then can we have any type of running game at all? Yes, but I'm worried. I am if Spencer Brown doesn't work out and Roger Saffold doesn't work out, I'm worried about this offensive line. I'm already kind of worried about it because we're hoping that Spencer Brown made a jump from last year. Spencer Brown played well last year, better than as I maintained all offseason. He played better last year than he had any right to, given his career only playing 8-on-8 football in high school. Then he went to the University of Northern Iowa. Then he opted out the year before the draft. He's green and raw. He should not have been playing and starting last year. He did. He played better than we thought, but when he was bad, he was a vulnerability and he was a deficiency. So even if the offensive line is healthy, you're hoping Spencer Brown takes a jump in his run blocking and his pass protection from an awareness and technique perspective. Roger Saffold, I love his run blocking ability and his physicality, veteran presence, and awareness, but because of some footwork issues, he has some issues in pass protection. Now, playing between Deion Dawkins and Mitch Morse on the left side at that left guard spot potentially course corrects for some of that. And his, not to be corny or play that card, but his veteran savvy and know-how helps him a little bit. But even with a fully healthy offensive line of Dawkins, Saffold, Morse, Bates, Spencer Brown, I still have some questions about the offensive line. So even if they were completely healthy, I'm still a little worried and I still have a little trepidation. If Saffold is out and Brown is out, I'm full worried, which is, again, why I wanted the Bills to draft Parham in the third round. Not that I don't like Terrell Bernard, but I wanted that offensive versatility and depth. I think the Bills have a lot of overall depth on the offensive line. I don't think they have a lot of quality depth. So, yes, if anything happens there, I'm worried. I'm worried. Going to some more comments here. What do we got? Comment here. Moss looks sharp right now. He looks like he has a really good burst going. He looks healthy. I will say that. So I'm very interested to see what he's going to be. If anybody has any final thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, anybody, feel free to start throwing them in because we're starting to wind down here. Okay, so I see a lot of the chat is going back and forth between each other, and that's fantastic. I love to see that, but that also means start to put up the banner here. This is Toodles, you guys. This episode was fantastic, as I think all of them are, but granted, I'm probably biased. But the engagement, the energy in the chat, the questions, the comments, the thoughts, concerns, everything. I thought this was a potential, not hot button topic, but one that will kind of get some conversation going. So I loved seeing everyone's presence here. Timeout. We got a tool reference from Douglas for Singletary. Singletary is the screwdriver, making progress one turn at a time. So Singletary is the screwdriver, Cook is the scalpel, Moss is the hammer. I like it a lot. Timeout. Got another one from Chris. Any thoughts on how Blackshear looked? Yes, he was a standout for me on day one. I'm going to the scrimmage on Friday. I'm excited to see what he brings. He had speed. He had real speed and burst. He was a little electric coming out of the backfield early in camp. I'm excited to see. Got to take another time out because it's an awesome comment from John. John says, what's awesome about this show and Cover One and this chat is this is for real, all caps, Bills fans. Everyone in here knows his, her, their, etc. stuff. Very nice, very nice. See, I was going to wind down. People getting in comments because I missed things. Steven says, I had a question earlier. Why is a back better at gap runs? Their lack of vision. A lot of it comes down to pacing and how you see things. So it could be vision related because when you have zone runs are almost very much like a choose your own adventure type of thing. There's no specific hole the run is supposed to go to, whereas a gap run is like, okay, the aim point for the running back, he's supposed to go between the guard and the tackle. That's where this run is supposed to go. Whereas a zone run, it's more just like everybody's stepping this way, find the hole, be like water, flow and go. Flow wherever there's an opening and get through it. So it is vision related, but I think a lot of it is pacing. There's a different type of pace, and gear that you have to hit as a gap runner. Speaking from some experience as well, there's your footwork, your processing, your aim point, how you set up your blocks. It's different with gap than it is versus zone. Again, even with the zone blocking scheme, the linemen don't even necessarily have to move their man. They just have to impede his progress and get in his way. So you have a lot more fluidity and variability in how you can set your blocks up. Gap is very specific. So again, you have to have the right footwork. You have to have the right aim point. You have to have the right timing. You have to have the right vision and elusiveness to get to the hole and make it happen. So it's a different scheme. It all starts with the way it's blocked up and how it's coached up and where your end point, your goal is as the running back. But they're just different schematically. I know that's like a lot of pieces, but vision is definitely a part of it, like you mentioned, but there's a lot of holistic pieces in it because the schemes are so different from, start to finish perspective holistically. But very good question. And as I was mentioning, as we wind down here, that question is symbolic of the energy in this chat as a whole. You guys and girls were fantastic in this episode. I appreciate the super chats and the donations that came through. And really, I just appreciate everybody being here. It's tremendously rewarding to do a show and go live and start to see more and more people funnel in and to have people engage with you and engage with each other in the chat, and just the positivity and the thoughtfulness and just everything. This was, appreciate you, Carl. Carl says another terrific and informative show. Thanks as always, Ant. Appreciate you, Stephen. Thank you very much. Tools, my man. Thank you very much. Sorry, for those of you who aren't watching and just listening, I was pulling up kind words that people were leaving in the chat, which is kind of corny to me, so I probably shouldn't have done that, but I wanted to let everybody know I appreciate those kind words. But yeah, this episode was fantastic. Thank you very much. A lot of the reason it was fantastic was because of the live viewers. If you are watching this later, listening to this later, whatever have you, try and join us here on Disguise Coverage for a live episode. That would be fantastic. I'd love to get as many people here just because I like to get the creative juices flowing and all the thoughts and engagement and everything back and forth. But nonetheless, if you are still here live on this episode, please drop a like on this video. If you are watching, listening, viewing later, whatever verbiage you want to use, thank you so much for your view, your listen, your download. Please drop a like on this video. If you are watching later, please drop a review and a rating if you're listening on any one of the podcasting apps or platforms. No matter where you are watching or listening, please subscribe to Disguise Coverage. That goes a long way towards helping the show to track and trend in a lot of different ways in the algorithms and platforms and all that stuff. Subscribe to Disguise Coverage while you are at it, please. And thank you. I appreciate you folks so much, more than you will ever possibly know. Oh, man, that's really, I don't want to pull up more positive things for myself, but I appreciate, Ronald, your comment about watching later from the start, and then John, your follow-up. Thank you very much, man. It means a lot. I appreciate it. And thank you again, John, for your super chat, and Sophia for yours as well. Thank you both very much. Next week, fun announcements for next week. The Buffalo Bills have a preseason game next week. Next week, there will be an episode of Disguise Coverage functioning as the post-game show for the Bills preseason game next week. So tune into Disguise Coverage live immediately following the Buffalo Bills preseason game next Saturday for an episode of Disguise Coverage. Next week's Wednesday episode of Disguise Coverage, normally at 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays, it'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern next Wednesday because I have a special guest on the show next week, and I wanted to move the schedule around a little bit to accommodate that special guest. I'm very excited for the topic for next week's episode, what it'll be, what it comes down to. A lot of scheme and X's and O's talk and a lot of really good football knowledge and understanding will be coming from next Wednesday's episode. I wouldn't have moved the time if this guest wasn't worth it. So I'm very excited. More to come on that via Twitter. So again, 2 episodes next week, a special 6 p.m. start time live next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern, with a really awesome guest that I'm very excited to bring on to the show. Very knowledgeable and excited to talk scheme and talk ball and X's and O's with him. And then next Saturday, immediately following the preseason game, bang it right here for a post-game episode of Disguise Coverage, where we are going to be diving into a lot coming out of that Bills' first preseason game. Thank you very much for all of your support in any way, shape, or form that it comes in. If you like this episode, please tell all your family and friends and loved ones about it. If you thought this episode and the show was terrible, tell your enemies. I appreciate you all more than you will possibly know. I will see you next week twice And I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and taking care of one another. Thank you all so very much for the kind words. I'm seeing them all. I appreciate you all so very much. Thank you. Be kind to one another. I will see you next week. And as always, go Bills.